Great, now we're recording. Can we start with Wayne? And Wayne, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and we'll go around the panel.
Yeah, my name's Wayne Campbell. I'm the university's academic registrar, which means that I'm responsible for students the moment you register and come to the point where you graduate.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lightfoot. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor for Teaching, Learning and Students.
And Charlie Jeffrey, I'm the Vice Chancellor.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megansh Kapoor. I'm the Vice President, GSA. Academics.
And I'm Matt Johnstone. I'm the Academic Officer at UCU.
Great. So I think we're going to crack on with some questions from opening statements. Apologies. So both groups have a 1 minute opening statement, and then we're going to move into questions. So I'll hand over to you for that 1 minute opening.
Well, thank you for organising the event. I'll probably stand up, it's a bit easier. Look, I think it's hugely disappointing that York students are facing industrial action at this time after such a difficult period. I think it's disappointing too, because where the issues are under local influence, for example, on contracts and conditions, we have, as I think my UCU colleagues in York will agree, one of the best records in the UK. Much is beyond local influence though. These are national negotiations among hundreds of employers. I know we've done our best to have an impact by putting the screws on those who run the pension scheme, and by putting up huge financial guarantees, we've stopped huge increases in contributions the scheme wanted to impose. I have to say, I didn't see much support from the national UCU as we did that, and the national UCU hasn't put its proposals formally into negotiations. I think in that situation, especially as we actually agree on an awful lot about the problems of the scheme, industrial action is premature. So my hope is that all the parties will continue to work to an agreed outcome. Beyond that, my commitment to you is twofold. I'm already over, sorry. You get another 15 seconds, Joanna. My commitment to you is twofold. We'll do what we can to mitigate the impact on you, and I know our staff will have your best interests at heart too. And I will work with local UCU colleagues to help manage a difficult situation as best we can.
Thank you very much for that, Charlie. I should have said before we started that we have a ballot this week, which is open to all students. That's being advertised across the social media, and it's going to be emailed to all students on Wednesday. And I think there'll be a reminder on Friday. We've had, off the top of my head this morning, about 400 students complete that already. And I really would encourage you to do it yourselves and to encourage your friends and your housemates as well, because it's really, really useful for us to talk and come to raise concern to the university and vice versa. So anything you can do would be really, really useful. Let's kick off the questions then.
If anyone would like to do that after that, immediately after the session, that QR code links directly to the form.
Great, thanks, Matt. Over to you. Happy to kick off.
So we're going to alternate who asks questions, and we'll take some questions from the floor as well. Although we do only have 25 minutes, give or take. We might overrun ever so slightly. So how will university students be refunded economically for the impact of strikes on their studies? And if this isn't happening, could we have a reason as to why this is not deemed fair?
Can I start on that? First of all, we don't know what the impacts of industrial action will be. We don't know yet what form the industrial action will take. We do know that where industrial action happens, it happens unevenly, more in some departments than others, and mixed pictures within particular departments. So we don't know what the impact will be that's experienced by any particular student. We will, and Tracy can say more about this, do what we can to mitigate those impacts in various ways so that disadvantage is not incurred. And at the end of that process, if a student is unhappy, there is a complaints process that can be gone through, which has a university incarnation. And if satisfaction is not gained from that, there is a process beyond the university. So that's all I can say on the matter, really. We just don't know yet what the impacts will be. Tracy, did you want to say something about mitigation?
Yeah, definitely. So as Charlie said, it's really difficult. We saw this last time. We don't know where action might take place and what form that might be. But wherever possible, we looked to ensure that that teaching is delivered. That might be through other staff covering. It might be through GTAs, for example, picking up teaching and learning. if we know there's been a loss of learning, then what has happened in the past, we will adjust assessments accordingly as well. We don't want students in a situation where they go into an exam period where those exams cover learning that has not been delivered. So we mitigate at all points. And we work very closely with departments, with our colleagues, to make sure that that disruption is minimised and any mitigations are put in place to support students.
Thank you very much. I should also say that these questions that I've got in front of me here are constructed from comments in the open comment section of that ballot form. So yes, Campbell.
So the university handbooks states of postgraduates and undergraduates both that we will be having successful academia throughout our years of education in the university. But as we all know, this is the third year of disruption after 2 consecutive years of COVID. So what should a student expect after this third year? Like, is that why they spent all their fee amount, or?
Okay, I think there are different dimensions to that question, and my colleagues might have something to say. I think we did what we could to support students as well as we could through the pandemic, and I think if you look comparatively, we probably did rather better in supporting students than other universities may have done. That doesn't mean I discount all of the disruption that we have seen and that students have faced, and perhaps Wayne and Tracy can say a little bit about that. I wanted to say something else. The higher education sector has been beset by, for years, with a repeated conflict. We have to break out of that. And from my perspective, that means that the two sides in this dispute have to find a different way of talking with each other to find the solutions that we haven't been able to find yet. We do agree on an awful lot. There are some parameters, especially on the pension side, which are set by others, but I think we can influence those parameters if we actually work together at the national level to exert pressure. So I think there are things that can be done to break out of the cycle and prevent this happening again, Ekanch, but we've all got to have the resolve to do so. That was perhaps not exactly what you were asking, and Wayne and Tracy may have something to say about the disruptions that students have faced over the last couple of years.
First of all, it's what's happened over the course of the last year or two is regrettable. For me, it's very disappointing, and I know that life has been very difficult for all of you, and we do understand that, and we have done our best to try and support you throughout that period. Some of the things that we have done to help students get through what has been an incredibly challenging pandemic is we've provided funding to support student hardship and IT bursaries, and that funding's amounted to close to about £2.5 million through 14 rounds of funding. We've also provided support for student wellbeing, and we've done that through making available a platform called Together All, as well for students to use. And in addition to that, we have put funding into introducing student wellbeing officers, working with academic departments, reporting up to faculties to support you, and they should be visible on the ground. You can contact them through your departments. Contact details are available on the website. And in addition to that, we have done, we've made support packages available for students as well during periods of self-isolation, and food parcels available as well, and Christmas hampers for those living on campus and off campus. And we've recognised through pulse surveys that students have had difficulties connecting with each other and with students in their own academic departments, in their own cohorts. So we put funding into an academic community scheme, which is student-led, appointing departmental community coordinators. Some of you may actually hold those roles in departments, and we certainly decided to continue that good practice this year as well. We've done that and much more. And as a university, we've actually provided funding as well to UCU to support a number of initiatives. And also we've funded the forest. That that great activity outdoor space that's there, and we've, in addition to that, provided additional outdoor space as well. So we've done that and more to support students, but we do understand that this has been a very challenging year, and that's why we've tried to support you as best as we can, and we would look to do so as well through industrial action.
Can I add to that as well? So I think just to echo what Wayne said, I think the last 2 years have been unprecedented, and the disruption that you've all faced, we can't underestimate that impact that's going to have on you. But I'm particularly proud of 2 things that we've done. Wayne's alluded to one, which is the financial support and student support and wellbeing. But coupled with that, it's about our delivery of our teaching and learning. And I think it's a challenge that we've had from both of our student unions, from GSA and UCU, into how we support our students through that time. In particular, the assessment support package we put in place. That was a challenge that you put to us, we responded. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that last time around we were the first Russell group to come out with that support package. We changed our exceptional circumstances policies to support our students. We're still doing that this year, but this is one of those big COVID keeps for me. We got the challenge, we've responded, and we've kept going. We're doing all we can to make sure that students complete their learning, as well as that wider integrated student experience, and achieve the success that we hope you will go on to have. And I think the challenge we've had from GSA and UCU has been really set the scene on that, and we've responded well, and I'm proud of what we've achieved collectively.
And I should have also said, actually, a lot of what we've done has been in partnership with the 2 student unions, with USU and GSA, and we very much welcome that partnership and that very productive contribution that it's made to supporting student life and their teaching and learning.
Thank you. I think what Charlie was saying at the start there about some universities have stepped up when others haven't. Some universities have also sat on the fence, and others have put the fence up. So yeah, I think you did relatively well in the grand scheme of things. So we've had a couple of questions from us. I'd like to take a question from the floor now, digital or otherwise. Matt, first.
We've heard the UCU talk about strike action this term and the reballot and ramping up the strike action next term. What are the university doing at all to make sure we're not sat here in January, February having the same conversations about strike action and the impacts?
I'll not repeat what I said at the outset about working really constructively with local UCU on the things that we have under our control. I'll say a little bit more about what might be done at the national level. I think I stuck my neck out relative to other vice chancellors in the sector in a way which was not popular with some, in challenging the pension scheme and challenging the way that they have, I think, run it in a haughty way which doesn't reflect an accountability to those who pay into it, that is the institutions and the individuals. And I think through that, I helped to create, if not a consensus, then a stream of opinion at the national level, which really put pressure on the USS, the pension scheme. And I think it's that, together with the financial guarantees I mentioned, that have removed a huge threat both to universities and to individual members. We currently collectively put about 30% of salary costs into the pension scheme, about 2/3 university on top of salary, and then individuals contribute about 1/3 of that. The USS was saying that had to rise to 56%. I think we have averted that. I think some of the work that I have done has helped to avert that and brought us into a situation where we can discuss things on a different kind of terrain. I am very, very happy for that discussion to continue. I know that there is a draft proposal that the UCU negotiators at the national level discussed in the negotiations, but it wasn't tabled formally. I've asked for a copy of it. I haven't got a copy. Nobody has been given a copy of it. Put that on the table. We'll talk about it. And that may be a way of not being here next spring.
Okay, we've got just over 10 minutes left before the break and changeover. I've got a question on Zoom from Dimitrina Ivanova. Can you please ask management if they feel they provide enough paid preparation and marking time for their GTAs across the institution? I'm not sure who that's best for.
It may be Tracy in the detail a bit more than me, but I'm really aware that issues of contracting and recognising all the work that is done by GTAs have been a big one in the sector. I am delighted that working with UCU colleagues, we have moved this university into a position which I think is ahead of the sector in most respects, in recognising the work that's done, but also in contracting properly and ensuring that rights of employment are enjoyed. But Tracy, you'll know the detail a bit better than me.
I'm probably going to hand over to Rich actually, but just to say we are working really hard on this and it's continual dialogue. So it's not something that we've stopped doing, it's something that we're continuing to work on, we're continuing to work with academics to make it more straightforward and streamlined for them as well. But I think Rachel can provide the detail of the contracts.
Yeah,
Rachel's the HR director, by the way, of the university.
So I suppose there's a couple of things for me. One, to reiterate the great work, and this really is true partnership with all our trade union colleagues actually, that brought this to the forefront, and we've been working through that. So previously GTAs were on casual engagements, and they had the terms and conditions that were associated with casual engagements. Through the joint working, we've actually moved that to that there will be, for people who have 0.1 FTE, that they will be moved on to an employment contract. But even those that remain that don't have the 0.1 FTE, sorry, full-time equivalents, that they will remain on casual arrangements, but with mirrored terms and conditions. So they get the enhanced sick pay, the enhanced holidays that they would not otherwise get. So with regards to the specific question, is that they should be paid, individuals should be paid for every hour that they work. So there is preparation and assessment time that is taken into account with that.
Thank you very much for that.
I want to ask one more thing, which is asked by the student, especially the PGT students. They have the chaos around them that they are here just for 1 year, and what kind of disruption will they be facing, and do we have any backup plan, especially for the PGTs, because it will be quite unfair if even a single month of their studies will get disrupted.
To Tracy for the substantive point, but we still do not know what disruption we will see. And I should have said that we are expecting, I think, the National UCU to announce what industrial action is planned today, or certainly very soon. And that then cannot happen during a 2-week notice period.
There's a required statutory 14 days.
Yes, absolutely. So whatever happens, it doesn't happen straight away. So there will be a further preparation period for us to think through, depending on what the action is that might be called, and depending on the conversations that we can have locally to think about how we best manage it on the ground. But Tracy, more specifics.
Yeah, so as we said to the first question, this is about putting in place mitigations wherever possible to minimise that disruption. And again, that disruption is going to vary very much across departments, within departments, and across programmes. So that might be replacing lectures, rescheduling lectures. It can be changing assessment formats, I've alluded to already. And it's also, in particular, for that supervision part as well. Obviously, some supervisors may take industrial action, they may not. But it's about making sure that those projects are supported as well. And whilst obviously there'll be disruption up until potentially a time point in May, there's another 6 months after that by which students do need have the opportunity to complete. And it could be in individual cases, we would look at exceptional circumstances as well. It depends on where that impact is within the journey of those master's programmes. And some master's programmes differ. Some have a lot of teaching in autumn and spring term. Some also have teaching in summer term as well. So, and they're quite different. So we would look very much to work with departments to understand what learning has been lost and how we can support students on their own journeys.
Also important to say, Kanish, that in addition to complementing teaching, we'd also be looking to make additional teaching materials available as well where possible. That's our aim, to minimise that disruption.
So with the additional material, you mean uploading it on VLE or the online sites? Thank you.
Would students be examined on material that wasn't delivered, that was only uploaded for to cover for an academic that was striking, for example?
No, so if you look at how a module's set up, you've got a series of learning outcomes, and those assessments then assess those learning outcomes. So for example, just putting an example out there, I'm not saying it would happen. So if we imagine that we lost weeks 8 and 9, or even 7 and 8 where we are now, if we lost learning and there was materials not delivered, we would be asking academics to change those assessments. And this is what happened in the past. I have to say we had very little disruption in the past on some of the assessment formats. If it's additional resources, we wouldn't be assessing those, because it could be in the same way that we provide independent learning now. It's just signpost into additional resources to supplement, not for assessment.
Thank you. Take another question from the floor. I'm not going to come to you. I'll save your questions for when you're on the panel. Emily.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for organising this and having a chance for students to speak to you directly. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for that. So I'm a TFTI department representative, and I'm an international student myself, and I represent a very large international community. And what I would like is just a bit more further clarification on particularly how this is going to be affecting international students, bearing in mind that in 2019 we had the first round of strikes, 2020, 2021, and currently we're still feeling the effects of the pandemic. And now we're having another set of strikes, and I just wanted to know what further support, compensation, etc., support that international students may be receiving specifically, especially considering the fact that we pay up to 2-3 times more than home students.
I think I'm probably in part in the space of reiteration again, because we don't know what the impacts will be on particular groups, cohorts, or particular individuals, and we will do what we can to mitigate the impacts in ways that Tracy has said. And if individuals are dissatisfied after all of that, there is a route to complain and to seek redress in whichever form that you would seek it. And if the university process is not satisfactory in your view, then there's something called the Office of the Independent Adjudicator, to whom claims can be addressed outside the university. And if they agree with you, they can make us do things. So that's a very formalistic way of setting out the scene. But I think you need to know the formal situation should you wish to make use of it. And I think we will try to do what we can in a more human way to make the situation as I don't know quite what the word is, certainly not comfortable as possible, but as least disruptive as possible. And Tracy and Wayne may have something to say about that.
Yeah, we do have a number of staff that support international students, and they're available to you. What I should also say is that from the last strike action, the funds that were obtained through that were used to support students. They were used to support the student experience. They were used to fund a number of student projects. And we did that in partnership again with the 2 student unions, and they formed panels that decided how those funds were dispersed in terms of those student experience projects. And in addition to that, they were used to support student hardship as well. I think that's important to note, as well as individual student opportunity cases as well. And that was done in conjunction with the presidents of both UCU and GSA.
And when it comes to your rights during strikes, we have updated information on the UCU website, which has been compiled by our Advice and Support Centre. And I'm going to try and collate some information that Wonky have distributed as well, which is more general UK-wide information. So
We've got time for one more, probably.
one more from the floor. Frankie.
Yeah, and actually it kind of backs onto what you just said, Matt, about us compiling a guide of rights of students. We've spoken a lot about the kind of logistical and academic disruption to students, but I think what we've seen over the past 18 months is students getting fed up of essentially having their voice ignored and feeling ignored by government or whoever. what will the university be doing, I guess, in collaboration probably with us at UCU, to ensure that students feel empowered still during all of this, and to ensure that they still feel like their voices are being heard, even if they are facing disruption?
Thanks very much for that, Frankie. I'd say a meeting like this is part of that process, and I hope that the recorded version reaches many more students than can be here. And I'll pass on again to Tracy and Wayne for more substantive response.
So I think it's a really important point, and again, I think it's something that we can draw on the experiences of the pandemic and what's happened. We've already alluded to the really good partnership between the two student unions as well. So for me, there's a couple of things. It's regular dialogue between myself, with Matt and Akanch and whoever at that level, but it's coming to more meetings like this. It's meeting with the academic department reps and listening to the challenges that are coming up and how we can do that. So I expect to work really closely with Ben and Matt, Akanch and Daryl over the time period, once we know what is happening, to get a series of meetings in the diary. I suspect they'll be in Zoom because it makes it easier for people to participate in rather than just this, but looking at how we can keep that dialogue going at all times. So it's something that's top of our agenda, to get in touch and communicate with our students once we know what the timelines are.
And just to add to that, I'm really proud and pleased at the fact that we have a number of contingency groups in place at this university for student life and for teaching and learning, which Tracy chairs. And having the elected student representatives as part of that has been important in terms of hearing what you have to say and the feeling that's coming from students on the ground. In addition to that, in terms of hearing what you have to say, we also run a number of pulse surveys, which we have done throughout the pandemic and which we'll be continuing this term as well, just to get your views, how you're feeling about particular issues, so we can actually look at taking action. And in terms of the student voice as well, we're working with a student expert panel, which is a panel of students that reflect your views, and you can feed your views through to YUSU or through the panel, and indeed through the pulse survey, in terms of that constant dialogue that's been talked about.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us halfway. So I'd like to thank our panel. We're going to have a short 5 or so minute break now until 20 minutes to 1, and then we'll have the second session. So thank you very much to our panel.
Thanks for coming.
The tweets are out there, by the way.
Recording again, and I assume everyone can hear on Zoom. So thank you, everybody. We're now joined by UCU colleagues for our second panel. So I'll start with you and please introduce yourselves.
Hey, my name is Campbell. I'm a PhD student and I'm also a GTA in the Department of Archaeology. I'm in a weird situation that I'm both staff and student at the same time. So I've been through strikes from both sides.
I'm Hal Hamazov, maths PhD, and I'm here because university management has a lot of opportunities to email all students as they do, but there's rarely the opportunity to speak on behalf of UCU to all students like this.
My name is Janet Groot. I work in the Department of History. I'm also president of the University of York UCU branch. I want to thank UCU for inviting us to participate in this. It's very, very valuable to us to be able to have a dialogue with students. I really took the point about the student voice. We represent about 1,100 colleagues in this university, many of whom do student-facing work as academics, as professional support specialists, working with welfare, and many colleagues who are what are called GTAs, postgraduates who also teach. I'm sure that my colleague from GSA over here will have thoughts about all of that. And we really welcome the chance to engage with your concerns, and I'm sure to some extent your criticisms today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So should we kick off then with the 1 minute or just over 1 minute opening statement?
I will be quiet.
Okay, so as you kind of already worked out, this is pretty much a crisis situation for us, and that's why we've gone down the route of balloting our members and winning majorities in this university and across the UK for industrial action. And we're doing it because of the unresolved issues around our pay and conditions and our pensions. And we can tell you more about that or refer you to places for that. Please read the statement that we put out, which mean that the conditions in which we want to do our best for you are being eroded, where we have been pushing through negotiation, through lobbying, through campaigning, through all the things that people do to change people's minds, to get our employers at UK level to stop being so stubborn about making changes. And if there's a real contrast here between the UK level and what the Vice-Chancellor has already talked about, which is when we have problems here at York, we can often work them through. I can't remember when there was last a local strike dispute at York, but that is not the case about these issues which have to be solved at UK level. Other main point, we understand that students are probably both anxious and angry about being, as it were, in the middle of this conflict. They will be affected. We are looking to get your support, but we certainly would hope at least to have your understanding and respect, and we will try to respond to your questions as fully as possible. And lastly, I want to say that it is in the employer's hands to change this. They could offer to have negotiations where there were changed positions on offer, which would lead us obviously to reconsider what we're doing in terms of industrial action. They brought us here because at UK level, they have been very obstinate and unhelpful. They can take us away from here by a decision to get back to meaningful discussion, negotiation and change. The project, if you like, that Charlie talked about very effectively, I thought about joint work to change things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna. Should we crack on then with questions, Matt?
Indeed. So, for those who haven't read the statement yet, which can be found on the ballot form itself, we can click yes, I'd like to hear more. For those who haven't read the statement, could you give a summary of what the ballots were about, and so what the strikes are about more directly?
Mihal, you start, and then, because people have already probably heard a bit too much from me, and then I'll chip in if necessary.
Okay, so the strikes are in a way unique because they're about many issues at once. So on the one side, there's the four fights, which is pay. In the last 10 years, real terms pay has been reduced by more than 17%. It's about casualization, both on staff level and postgraduates who teach, both staff and students, about workloads. It's an open secret that no academic actually works their contracted hours. Everyone I've spoken to has said that it is impossible to do the job they have to do in the time of their contract. And inequality. There's significant pay gaps in the sector. Gender, disability pay gap is serious, and also the racial pay gap?
Ethnic gender injustice. Yeah. So we had these issues, and there's the stuff about the pension scheme, which can sound very technical. I think I just want to say the stuff about pensions is us putting money away now, and our employers paying in money now for the money that we will need to live on when we retire. And it was a scheme that was created. It's a bit too complicated and cumbersome. There's lots wrong with it. I agree with the Vice-Chancellor. It needs massive reorganisation. But it is one where people could look to a modest but guaranteed income when they finished work, at whatever point they did that, through their own savings and through the contribution from the employers. Using a very dubious system, that is what's called valuing the pension scheme, the people running the scheme chose a way of doing that which is unjustified and has been criticised by our employer colleagues as well as by ourselves, UCU, and on the basis of that proposed some absolutely horrendous changes, some of which, as the Vice-Chancellor said, the employers have pushed back on, others they have not, and they have blocked any kind of delay in attempting to impose these arrangements. And it's at that point that we took the decision to consult our members. I think it's really important. This has come out of democratic decisions by ballot, ballots across the UK in every institution, winning majorities for action, whether it's strike action, people going out on strike, standing on picket lines, that sort of thing, or what we call action other than a strike, other forms of withdrawal of our work and cooperation. But that we did by consulting our members. It wasn't some small group of, unpleasant activists who pushed the rest of the membership into action. It is the members who have said to us, enough is enough. And in York, we have majorities of different approaches, but from anything between 68 and 88% majorities for the action that is being planned out. So difficult. Nobody wanted to, I want to repeat, nobody wanted to be there. And if the employers had worked with us in a somewhat more constructive way, we wouldn't be here.
And I think if it's okay if I
Yeah,
can speak
please.
quickly, I think it's often difficult for students to quite understand how, why this should matter to them. But the only thing we can really say to that is that our working conditions are your study conditions. These are the conditions we are working with. For me as a GTA, I've seen my pay decrease over the last 3 years. To do the same job, I am being paid less. And many of you will want to go into academia in the future. This may be a career you're interested in. We're not just doing this. This is not just a selfish decision. This is about changing our sector for the future as well, because we are really, really hopeful that we can work with the university and nationally to improve things. Because, it is like you say, it's a running joke sometimes about how hard we have to work, how many extra hours we work. And we love what we do. That's why we're here. It's not like I enjoy taking industrial action. I want teaching. That's what I enjoy. So hopefully today we can give you some understanding of how this impacts you. And
I think that's really important. And if I can fling in one other boring fact, that a lot of the people in the system who do mainly teaching work, something like 40% or more, are on some form of insecure employment, which means how can they plan and prepare to be the best teachers and supervisors that they want to be if they have that insecurity in their lives, where sometimes they're not even knowing if they can meet the bills this week. It's as bad as that for some of my colleagues.
Thank you. Akash.
So why UCU is not striking during the examination period? Is that to cause maximum disruption by disturbing the classes?
Are you asking why we're not striking in the exam period?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is that we choose the forms of action that we think our members can do effectively and that will have leverage on the employers. What we want is to give the employers the opportunity to rethink where they're at. So the answer is that you will be hearing about this later this week, the formal, I'm not allowed to say anything about this decision until it's been publicly notified from the union. So I'm not playing games with you. But what we're looking at is days of action where people will be withdrawing their labour, and we will review this. This is what always happens in a dispute. We look at where we are, let's say in 4 or 5 weeks' time, and we say, okay, we've done enough, or okay, we've heard from the employers that they're now willing to talk to us properly. Or we have to say, maybe we have to push a bit harder. And at that point, the question of exam periods does become important. And of course, you will understand that every university has its own particular assessment arrangement. So there's no one magic moment where you could do this across the system. So these are decisions we make. And we've got 2 things in mind. One is, how can we be effective? Because we want the employers to rethink their position. And the other is how we can, as it were, keep the relationships going with students and employers while making those very powerful points. Okay, so, and as soon as we know, you'll know, if you want to do it that way.
Thank you. I believe UCU are publishing this afternoon, hopefully, is the plan. At least that's the rumor around the sector. So, can I take a question from the floor? Hands up, hands up. Okay, I'm going to ignore the SAB and the faculty rep for now. Sorry. On my left, your right, please. Yep. In a hat.
Yeah. So how can students show their support during the decision process?
I mean, a big one would be scanning the QR codes and, you know, asking UCU to support the ballots overall. That would be a massive first step and something that we would really, really appreciate. It really depends on the form of industrial action as well.
I think there are a number. I would add. I think first thing is express your view through the ballot. I always encourage people to participate in ballots, even if they're not going to vote as I wish them to do. But I'm encouraging you both to participate and to say support, which we've had in the past, which NUS at UK level, of course, is offering, and which other student unions up and down the country are saying that they have. So that's the first thing. Keep talking to our colleagues who indeed we work with very well here in this university and in other universities in the management. My view is, as Rachel knows, is we're all the university, any of us who works or studies here at the university, but our colleagues in the leadership, the decision making, the management, talk to them, talk to anyone else who says how wicked UCU are to be harming students. We know we're causing trouble, we're not pretending that we're not, but we're doing it for the reasons we gave. And if you can start explaining the things that Taryn and Mihail and I have been explaining to you, that's terrific. As and when we do take action, if you want to come and show support, please do. Everything is welcomed. And I think at least say to people, you may not like this, but at least you can understand it. I think it's a very important thing that we would say.
Thank you. We're having quite a few comments and questions coming through on Zoom. Lucy says, full solidarity with the strikers, and asks a similar question about how do we support you locally. However, Dom disagrees. He says, I understand the issues, why they feel this is necessary, but striking mainly affects students at the university at a local level. So how can we make an impact nationally? Because obviously, the national people involved in debates aren't being affected by strike action. How do we, or how do you rather, influence if we're striking locally here and not necessarily affecting people in those negotiations?
I think the first sort of boringly practical thing to say is that the days of action, as and when they come, will be taken across the UK. So although we are doing it here at York because we have a mandate here at York to take action, our York colleagues have said, yes, we think the situation is bad enough that we need to make this trouble. We're also doing it with tens of other universities which will all be happening on the same day. So people will be looking at, and there'll be interviews and there'll be media coverage of it, we hope, and we're certainly working for that, that says this is a problem in the sector. Time for a change. We need to understand why colleagues working in higher education are taking this action, which they don't like taking. So I think that's the way it works. And of course, conversations are, I hope, going on between ourselves, the union at UK level, and the employers to see if the level of anger, which is now very public because of the votes for industrial action, has got the employers to think again about the things that they have said. They've said they don't want an HE, a sector level approach to workload problems, to casualisation, or to gender inequities. Unlike the very constructive local approach that we've developed here, I would like York to be a model for the sector, actually, but they do, because academic life, people move from one university to another, whether as students, as researchers, as teaching staff. So we need good standards in the sector. It's not enough that we make progress in York. And that's the bit we're wanting to get the leverage on. And that's what we're looking for. And there will be national arguments about that. There have been questions in Parliament and all of those sorts of things. So we're very conscious that things need to shift at UK level.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, so happy to a few more questions.
Yeah. So when we're in the midst of a culture war, as it's being called, where HE is under fire from the government And we have the Auger review, the government's response to the Auger review coming out soon, which is looking increasingly likely to decrease overall funding for universities. And when cohesion in HE as a sector between not just staff and institutions, but students as well, is paramount, why is now the time to strike?
I think we have to be really careful when we're talking about those arguments. I'm not a big fan of the argument that because things may be bad, that means we shouldn't do anything. I think it's more important than ever, especially because of the pandemic and because of the effects that the pandemic has had, because the pandemic has affected you and it's affected us too. You know, it's affecting everyone. Now is the time, because the pandemic has exacerbated a lot of the issues that we already have. So yes, that's a good point. It really is. But I think they would agree with us, but we have to strike. We have to not literally strike, but sort of strike while the iron is hot, you know, while there is momentum there. You know, universities and the media, it's always a funny thing, I guess. But again, just because, you know, you just well, I guess what I'm trying to say is just because we may feel pressure from the outside doesn't mean that should stop us doing what is right for the sector, what is right for our colleagues, and in the end, what is right for our students.
And we've been talking about disruption due to action from UCU, but I would say that disruption is already here. People are working untenable hours. People are working sometimes without being fairly paid, and that is affecting the learning conditions of students. So the disruption is already there. Maybe it's not as stark as when we go out on the picket lines, but it's, yeah, this is not something new, and we're trying to help with the underlying problems.
Another question on the floor.
Yeah, I think you spoke about what exactly?
I'll start.
Did you tell her that?
I will take York as a model. I think we've tried to.
So she was just, it was just her talking.
We want a sector where people's pay, first of all, is reasonable, allows people to live, and a decade of fall in, over a decade of fall in the real value of pay is pretty problematic, as people in other sectors know. But specifically in our sector, we need a sector where insecure or impermanent employment is better managed. That's what we call casualisation. And we need our employers to say, we will work with you to create a set of standards and practices, not just look at the data and say how difficult it is to understand casualisation. They've done quite a lot. We need standard practices in the sector as a whole that make non-permanent employment a better deal than it now is. And Mihail and Tarek could be much more eloquent on that than I am. Tarek is much more eloquent on that than I am. Similarly, and I can say this because I've worked on this both at UK level and at York level, that whereas at York level, issues of gender inequity, the gender pay gap, which is worse in HE than many other sectors of society of employment.
I do think it's a good
we're doing practical work to reduce gender inequity, which is often linked to issues like disability, family situation, ethnic diversity. Practical work. The employers have stayed with, UK level, have stayed with the, well, we're happy to talk about how difficult and complicated it all is, but we will not set standards. They keep saying, no, that has to be left to individual institutions. The idea of good practice in the sector is something our employers at sector level, at the level of all universities, don't seem comfortable with. Similarly with workloads. And I really do, I think the fact that the things have begun to change at York, which is hard work both for management and for us as the union, but nonetheless they are, tells us that it could happen and our employers are resisting it. And we think that's absolutely not good for the sector. Absolutely not good for any student, whether they're undergraduate or postgraduate, taught or research, just as it's not good for anybody who wants to work in the sector. And we think that is worth pushing hard on. And I should say we've been pushing on for more than a year, you know, over several years. So the level of crisis and frustration is high because we really have been trying all the other routes that people reasonably should try. And they're not working. Which is why our members have told us by very significant time has come to make a bit more of a fuss, to create difficulties for students. We're not pretending this won't be disruptive, because we need to do things differently. I think we think that students need for us to do things differently.
And for example, I love teaching. I've had Matt as a student in one of my seminars, but I've stopped now. I was planning on doing more GTA work at the beginning of this year, but there was so many problems and so much extra work to get fair payment and fair conditions through just battling with people that it was just not worth it anymore, which is sad. People who like teaching should have good working conditions and teach, because that's what the students need.
And we often talk, talk about student mental health, but staff mental health is really struggling as well. You know, really is struggling. You know, something like 4 in 5 staff report struggling with their workload. You know, there's a huge, I think it was something like 50% of academics showing symptoms of depression.
I heard you have something to do on like 6 December after the talk.
This is why we are seeking to take further action going forward. This is why we think it's important.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question.
When we talk about end exploitation of postgraduate research students, what do we exactly mean by that from the UCU perspective, and especially for the University of York?
Got 2 very experienced colleagues here who can talk about that.
So simply, we want an end to casual engagements, which is what they're called, which entail
we all went for the weekend away together.
How do I phrase this best? Point of casual engagements is that you're not required to do the work, and departments and management are not required to provide the work. But of course, it's not, the power dynamic is not equal. You cannot really expect to not do the work that you're not required to do and get more work in the future. And there's been a lot of talk in departments and from people we've talked in management about how much postgraduates prefer the flexibility, which we have not heard. And we have polled postgraduates who teach, and they do not prefer the flexibility. They would like stability and security in their work.
What I would say is I'll give a personal example. I'd like to start by saying that my department is very supportive, but because of the way the pay structure in the university works, for my seminars each week, so I teach a module in my department, for my seminars each week, I'm paid 1 hour prep. Realistically, I do about 7 or 8 hours of prep. I have to do it, otherwise I can't do the teaching. And I've told other GTAs in my department, and they say exactly the same thing. We are given small amounts of admin time to deal with students, but we're spending hours with students every week, you know, helping them with their studies. And we do this because we care. You know, I'm not going to say to a student, sorry, I've run out of admin time, I'm not going to answer your email. You know, I care about my students, I care about their learning, I care about their welfare. But we are being taken advantage of. We really are, in terms of prep work, in terms of admin time, the terms of our contracts, the fact that we have been moved onto these contracts, but we were given very little information in advance. So when they turned up, the hours I was given did not tie into what I thought I was going to get at all. It was confusing, it was frustrating, and
what you probably don't realise is that your departments are way more reliant on casualised workers than you know. The vast majority of people who teach you, if you're an undergrad, will very likely be people on casual contracts or short-term contracts. And this is a major thing across the whole of higher education. You know, I can't remember what the percentage is exactly, but something like 41%, isn't it?
Of teaching, yeah, of teaching
People,
only
people
stuff.
who are on teaching specific contracts, about 41% are on, have some sort of casualised arrangement.
And we talk about the pensions, but GTAs are in the fortunate positions of not having to worry about pensions because we don't get any.
And I think the two things there, I just, if I can come in as well. I think the first is the issues that Michal and Taryn have raised about insufficient understanding of what it takes to do the job. And I think the other is not knowing from one term to another. And this is the point about flexibility, that, you know, that when we consulted with our postgraduate colleagues who do teaching or similar activity in labs or language work or whatever it is, they said the ability to plan their whole academic year, bearing in mind that these people are also researchers, they're people who are doing PhDs or other professional qualifications at the same time as they're working with students. To be able to plan over a year rather than on a term by term basis is good for them. It's good for them professionally because they can do their work to the best level they possibly can. But of course, it's also about a bit of financial and work security as well. So those, I think, are the two big things. They're big things in the sector as a whole. They're important at York, which is why we're involved in working groups with our colleagues in HR to make progress in this area.
Thank you very much. Before we finish, can I ask you to join me in thanking all our panelists that we've had today?
To air these questions, because it's often very difficult for students to find out what's going on. Please get in touch with us. There is a UCU contact, and we will keep talking, I hope, to our colleagues in UCU as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just final before we go, yeah, we've said it quite a few times, so please do fill out that ballot. We really want to hear your views. There's a big text box there, so please share your views with us because we're here to represent you. Thank you very much for joining us either in person or on Zoom. And yeah, we're always here to help you, and feel free to stay behind if you've got any questions for your Sabs and myself. Thank you.